Thank you very much, Deb. Good morning, delegates and guests. Thanks very much, Deb, for the introduction. And Deb, to you and to the board, thank you on behalf of the government for the working relationship that we have. It's one that's based on candor and honesty and a shared vision for the province. But we appreciate the relationship very much, and we know that we're going to continue to tend to it. I have a bit of a somber announcement actually to make here to start things off this morning. Councillors Wade Murray and Dave Knight, are you here? I hope they're here. There's Wade. Mayor Ross Apperly, Mayor Mike Nadamagan from Pine House, Mayor Deb Higgins. You've all been released by the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. I am mindful this morning that I am in the company of local leaders. Some pretty incredible women and men. You don't do it for the power. We know that. You don't do it for the fame or for the glory. And you most assuredly don't do it for the money. You do it because you want to serve your respective communities. Maybe some of you like the competitive aspects of local politics. Maybe that's a small part of it. Maybe some of you had specific priorities, passions that you wanted to see furthered at the local government level. But by and large, you do what you do because you love your community and you love your province and you want to give back. And so there is this great canyon-like gap between what you might get, some sort of worldly recompense, what you might get for this service and the work that you put forward. And frankly, never has it been more obvious, that gap. More laid bare for all of us to see than in these last 10 days or so. And the example for us has been the community of La Loche. Mayor Kevin Janvier and his councillors, some of whom were first responders a week ago Friday. And the example for us has been Chief Teddy Clark and the Clearwater Dene First Nation. They have stepped up in amazing ways, ladies and gentlemen, under the most difficult and tragic and horrific of circumstances. They have stepped forward to provide quiet and competent and effective local leadership in the aftermath of that tragedy. That's what local government is called on to do sometimes in our province, it would seem. We had a very difficult forest fire season, and we saw that same kind of local leadership across the north, from First Nations chiefs and mayors, Mayor Thomas and Laurent, others who were there to calmly lead the province through the largest evacuation we've ever seen. And taking their cue from local leadership, especially in La Loche, was the entire community. They leaned on those local leaders. And it is worth that we would recognize that this morning. It is worth it that we would recognize that leadership at the local level that is asked to do so much. In La Loche, that example has been set not just by the council, but was set by teachers who a week ago Friday saved lives, make no mistake about it. By the 4 RCMP officers that I had the honor of meeting last Friday who were first on the scene, who also saved lives. By the EMTs and the nurses and the doctors at the health center. 3 of the nurses that were on duty that day, it was their first day on the job. To elders in the community and to the church, to Archbishop Shatlin and his team of people, to that entire community, I think it would be meet and right if this room, if this group of delegates offered them the warmest thanks for their example of local leadership. And I thank you on behalf of a grateful province that you have stepped forward in leadership as well at the local level. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning I want to talk a little bit about this last year we've had, the immediate future, the long-term future, and you know there's an election coming up. I'm not sure if you've heard about it or not. It's going to be roughly on or about the 4th of April. You'll be able to vote all day long until the polls close, probably about 8 p.m. And I do want to talk a little bit about that. So this speech might be just a little bit more political than it is, usually. The forest fires and the response to those fires, of course, came at a certain cost to the province of Saskatchewan. Happily, there were no major injuries and no loss of life. There were structures that were lost and there was resources that were well spent. It's going to cost roughly $100 million all told in terms of direct and indirect costs from the fires. Fortunately, we in the province of Saskatchewan have been and remain in a good position to respond to disasters. Not just from a financial perspective, but really as an economy. And in the north, we saw a strong corporate presence. We saw companies and business step forward to help through a very, very long forest fire season, because there are more of those kinds of companies now, and they have greater strength and the ability to contribute. In fact, I would submit to you today that notwithstanding low energy prices that have now been sliding since October of 14, this economy has never been stronger, has never been more diverse, has never been more resilient. We have a diversified economy like it's never been diversified before in terms of manufacturing and processing and innovation in the export sector. The statistics bear this out. Our economy has been tested and continues to be tested. And what we've seen, frankly, is encouraging. And I'm not being dismissive or cavalier at all about the impacts of what's gone on in the energy sector. I live in Swift Current. I have neighbors who are out of work. There have been layoffs in Saskatchewan. There is economic dislocation here. But comparatively speaking, the economy remains strong, and it has never been more diversified than it is today. Consider through this difficult time that this economy that you have been about building for the last 7, 8, or 9 years, this economy that's been built by your residents and the businesses in your community, added 1,500 full-time jobs last year, according to Statistics Canada. Compare that to what's been happening in other jurisdictions that are also dependent on the energy sector. Today, Saskatchewan, again facing an energy sector challenge, has the lowest unemployment rate in the Dominion of Canada. Building permits being issued in municipalities remain strong. We expect capital investment in 2015 to come in at about $15.5 billion. That's down, actually, from last year, but that's up 33% from 2007, and 2007 was the beginning of the strength. It was a pretty strong year. Exports for 2015 should come in at around the $30 billion mark. That's down from the record of $35 billion in 2015, but it's up 52% since 2007. And you obviously right now can't say, well, that's a currency thing. That's a strength thing. That's a worldwide engagement thing. That's the world wanting what Saskatchewan has to offer. This economy is durable, and it is diversified. And I've said this many times, and I'll continue to say it, the government, the provincial government, does not take credit for that. The credit belongs to others. But government can set the right tone. And government can create the environment that is either helpful to the economy or harmful to the economy. It has happened before in Saskatchewan, ladies and gentlemen, that the economy and the budget of the province, the finances of the province, sort of became delinked. I think most people intuit that, well, if the economy is strong, the province's budget finances are strong and vice versa. In 2009, we saw a near collapse in potash revenue and real softness in the budget, but still attendant economic strength. Jobs being created, people moving to Saskatchewan in significant numbers. I want to suggest to you that that same thing is happening today. This is the context for the important choices that I'd like to lay before you, important choices that we have considered carefully in government, and important choices that we have made that I want to announce this morning. There are, to be sure, some tough and short-term, emphasis on the short-term, fiscal challenges facing us, and therefore fiscal decisions that we need to make. We must, in my view, recognize the short-term nature of the challenges. We must not respond to them in a way that erodes the long-term potential of the province. We must maintain the vision of growth that we have shared these last many years, the aspirations that are worthy of the province of Saskatchewan with all of its resources and with its people, while being mindful that the underlying fundamentals of this province remain incredibly strong and the envy, frankly, of most other jurisdictions in North America. With respect to the short-term challenges, though, I can tell you what we face today. It won't be a surprise to any of you. Our government has serious revenue shortfalls. Serious revenue shortfalls. To deal with this, we have already been making difficult decisions. We've continued with our plan to control government spending, to reduce the size of government. In fact, our 4-year plan to reduce the size of government as measured by full-time equivalents by 15% has been achieved. It saves us $200 million annually, and we're working hard to control spending. In fact, we've seen reductions in spending in certain ministries and modest increases only in some of the larger ministries of government. And apart from the extra costs of the forest fire situation, our ministries, I can report to you, are hitting their targets. We've asked the Crown corporations in a new summary budgeting world to monitor their operational expenses, to control their spending, and they've been doing that as well. There isn't much room left, frankly, for cuts. If there were to be more cuts, it would start to manifest in places like healthcare and in education. We would have to withdraw from the infrastructure side of things to a greater extent. I would worry a little bit about social services as well. It's an option. But we don't think, I don't think, given that we're dealing with a temporary issue, that that's the right move for the province at this time. Whether or not we're going to get oil at 80 or 90 bucks again anytime soon, it will be back to 60, 55, 60 in the near to midterm. And by the way, when that happens, we'll come out on that end stronger than ever because our industry, of course, has been reducing its operating costs. But today, there's just not much room to reduce expenditures without getting in the way of healthcare delivery like we want to see it, or education services the way we want them, or social services at the availability that we would like them. We don't want to reduce revenue sharing. We've made a solemn promise to you. As long as we're the government, for however long that is, we've got that 1% formula. We're going to keep that 1% formula. We also need to, frankly, identify some resources for additional local infrastructure dollars. As I've traveled around and met with a number of you mayors and councils in different communities, and we'll be doing it now before the election, and you'll see us a lot during the election, I'm sure. You have been very consistent in your asks of the provincial government. Typically for mayors and councils that have been at these meetings, you'll know that I'll ask, look, if there was a money tree, if we could fund anything and everything, what's your top 3 things? Don't shout them out right now. There's the bear pit session coming up, and the ministers would be happy to take all of those questions. There's been a consistency, though you've talked about water and sewer projects, not only, but that is a common theme that we've heard from municipalities, and we've actually raised that with the federal government. The federal government have asked us, look, if there's a stimulus required in Saskatchewan over and above what's going to be happening in other jurisdictions because of the energy sector, something I want to thank the Prime Minister for publicly at SUMA and credit him for asking the question. But if there is to be infrastructure dollars, where might you use them? Well, roads always, and bridges always, and culverts always, but yes, we need to focus on water and sewer projects at the local level right across this province and municipalities. And if the federal government comes with some support for that, we need to be ready with our own dollars, notwithstanding the tight fiscal situation, and be a meaningful partner with municipalities and the federal government. So we need to make sure that we are not cutting things as to undermine our own growth plan and as to undermine the basic services that we want to provide at a high quality in the province of Saskatchewan. So that leaves just really two choices then, doesn't it? Both choices go completely against the very DNA of this current government of Saskatchewan, I can tell you. John Kenneth Galbraith famously said that, quote, "Politics is not the art of the possible. It consists in choosing between the disastrous and the unpalatable." I'm not a big fan of Galbraith's economics, but boy, do I ever understand that particular quote. So the first choice then, the first unpalatable choice, is to raise taxes. And frankly, the table's been set for that. You remember the budget last year. Ken Krevetz announced that there would not be an increase in the property tax at that point, the education property tax, but that we may have to do that in the future. The costs of education continue to go up. We're building new schools. We need to make sure we have enrollment increases. This is a good thing, but we need to make sure we're funding education. And so he served notice that eventually there would be an increase, probably this upcoming budget year, in education property taxes. There's also been a lot of talk about carbon taxes, or in our province, a carbon levy. We already have legislation passed whereby we could levy against heavy emitters a fee that would, on a summary basis, perhaps help the finances of the province of Saskatchewan. The problem, though, ladies and gentlemen, is that a lot of those high emitters are high employers. What would be the impact of any tax increase on the economy right now? What would be the impact on those who want to sustain the jobs that are here or create new jobs? I would rather, especially at this time, in the life of the province's economy, I would rather not increase taxes. We're going to have to move in that direction on that education tax, there's no doubt about it. But timing is everything. And one thing we've been able to portray to investors from outside the province and within the province as they look at other jurisdictions, other provinces, we've been able to say, if you invest here, you can expect stability and consistency. You can expect a competitive tax structure, competitive regulation. So this is the right place for you to invest and to create jobs. And frankly, right now, I want to keep saying those things to those prospective investors and those that are already here in terms of job retention and new job creation. So that leaves us with the last unpalatable choice, and that's to run a deficit for a short period of time. You may have noticed the deficits have become all the rage. They're in high fashion, delegates. Well, not at the municipal level. Economists have been advocating deficits in our country and the Western world, frankly, for some time, since really the meltdown in 2009. They point to the fact that interest rates are at an historical low. It's been noted that here in Saskatchewan, we have the capacity for more borrowing because our debt to GDP ratio is the second lowest in the country. And we have, for the first time ever, a AAA credit rating in Saskatchewan. In fact, you should know, we've seen our debt to GDP ratio fall from 20% in 2007, when we were elected, to 16.8% today. That's a roughly 20% reduction in the debt as a measure against the economy, in part because we've been paying off a little operational debt, and we've been, we, the royal we, not the government, overseeing a huge growth in the economy. In fact, if our debt to GDP ratio is 16.8%, it's worth noting that things are different in other provinces. In Ontario, the debt to GDP ratio is 47%. In Quebec, it's 65%. Probably a whole nother speech there. So after carefully canvassing all of the options, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, our government has reluctantly decided to run a modest deficit in this fiscal year, 2015-16, and because of the forecast continued weakness in the energy sector, we expect to run a modest deficit next fiscal year, 2016 and 17. This is a last resort. This is not something that we want to do, not something that I want to do. And mark my words, if the people of this province give us the chance to serve again in government on the 4th of April of this year, that budget will be balanced again by 2017-18. This solemn promise I make for the first time of many, I'm sure, to this group of delegates. We will get back to balance at the end of the next fiscal year. We will do it by controlling spending as we always have. We will do it by being good stewards of the economy. But we will also keep an eye on the long game, on the future of this province. And we'll do it by adhering to the key tenets of our growth plan, which have never changed since 2007, and they will not change. Those basic tenets have been supporting innovation and diversification, investing in infrastructure, engaging with the world, telling Saskatchewan's story in a way that I don't think has happened in the history of the province. I would warrant. Expanding educational and training opportunities and ensuring overall competitiveness by keeping our taxes low and making sure our regulatory regime is competitive, as competitive with any other place in Canada. Finally, the most important element of our growth plan has always been about fiscal responsibility and minding the finances of Saskatchewan, and we will continue to do that as well. There's one other aspect in our approach to government on the economic side that would remain unchanged should we have the opportunity and the honor to form government after the 4th of April. And that is that under a Saskatchewan party government, Saskatchewan would continue to have a strong voice on the national stage, especially on matters of the economy, especially on matters of interprovincial trade. If you'll permit me, just a few brief comments on the announcement last week of the federal government of a new process for approving pipelines. Let me be very clear. Our government believes that every single government and, frankly, corporations involved in the extraction industry or the transmitting industry need to make environment a top priority. But I am puzzled by the new rules that have been announced by the federal government. The federal government has decided it will take more time to review the Trans Mountain Kinder Morgan project in British Columbia and Energy East. Energy East, of course, will have Saskatchewan oil in it. Energy East will result in a major capital investment in the Moosomin area. The review net will now go from 18 months to 27 months. And for the first time ever, the National Energy Board will be asked to assess the upstream greenhouse gas emissions associated with the pipeline project. Here we have a problem, ladies and gentlemen. A proper review is essential. A proper environmental review is absolutely vital. We support it. We think it existed within the old NEB framework. But these reviews must be fair, and they must be impartial, and they need to be conducted with scientific rigor. And I'm not sure, we're not sure these new rules meet that test. Frankly, it appears that the federal government, with this process, is treating the energy sector different than other sectors across the country that also move durable goods and, frankly, chemicals across Canada. I haven't heard the federal government ask, for example, the auto sector to consider its upstream greenhouse gas footprint when it comes to transporting to market. I haven't heard them ask that of chemicals that move across this country on rail car or any other good. This country is home to the third greatest oil reserve on the planet. This country has a better environmental record, a better human rights record than frankly, than I would wager than any other country that has oil to the extent that we have it. We should be proud of it. We should understand that moving that oil across the country is positive for all of Canada. It creates thousands of jobs and it funds transfers to every region of Canada. The Energy East pipeline is by and large a conversion. 2/3 of it exists today, ladies and gentlemen. The Energy East pipeline gives us the chance to stop importing oil to Canada from places like Saudi Arabia. The Energy East pipeline gives us the chance to add more value right here in Canada. And here's something else that it does. For as long as you've been involved in local politics, and this means you, Barry, that's how long I'm talking about. You have been, through your governments and through the industry, selling your oil at a discount because we've had one customer, the United States of America. That's it. So there's this differential, this gap. It's closing now. It's smaller than it has been in a while because of the low price, but it averages this gap, this differential, the price that we could be getting versus the price we're getting. It's cost, on average, the Treasury of the province of Saskatchewan $300 million in the budget a year. Cost the industry over $2 billion. We could use that right now, couldn't we? I appreciate that the Prime Minister has reached out, the federal government have reached out to Saskatchewan and Alberta, and I thank him for the offer of working on something maybe a little bit unique and different for Saskatchewan and Alberta, given our experience with the energy sector and those families that are out of work. But there's a shovel-ready infrastructure project that will cost the federal government nothing. That Energy East pipeline, it needs a champion. It needs a champion. And we encourage the federal government to be that champion. So I don't know what the news will be coming out of this particular speech. I'm hoping that it'll be that revenue sharing is remaining intact and that we're going to find dollars for local infrastructure projects, especially in water and sewer, and we're going to continue to build out the infrastructure of the province together with our municipal partners. But I have a feeling that deficit thing might also get some coverage. And I hope the pipeline does too. But the coverage from this particular speech is probably going to have at least a certain group that sit just over the aisle from us asking a question that they've asked before. The question is, where did all the money go? And if you'll permit me, I just want to close with some answers, proactive answers to that question that I expect is coming, not just from them, but frankly, citizens in the province who might want to know what's happened with respect to government finances. How about $6 billion in tax relief since 2007? That's where the money went. About $800 million every year we put back in the pockets of Saskatchewan people, farmers, and small businessmen and women. Where did the money go? How about $3 billion on the operational debt of the province of Saskatchewan? That's that credit card we've been paying off, saving our province nearly $1.2 billion in interest payments. Achieving for the first time ever a AAA credit rating for the province of Saskatchewan. That's where the money went. About $8 billion since 2008 in infrastructure spending. $16 billion if you include the crowns. That's where the money went. $5 billion in highways investments and more needed, but $5 billion in historic budget year after year to rebuild Saskatchewan's roads and highways. How about $1 billion for new schools in Saskatchewan? and major renovations, including 9 joint use schools in our fastest growing communities using P3s. That's where the money went. It went to dramatically shorten surgical wait times year after year, to hire 500 doctors in the province of Saskatchewan, 3,000 nurses of every single designation. That's where the money went. 15 new long-term care bed facilities, a hospital for Moose Jaw, finally the rebuild of the Saskatchewan Hospital, finally a children's hospital for the province. That's where the money went. It went to help seniors. It went to help people with disabilities. And about $1.8 billion of it went to a meaningful and long-needed revenue-sharing program with the municipalities of this province. Here's a bit of the political part. Towards the end of the previous government's time in office, there was a lot of money in the bank. Let's remember that. There was a lot of money in the bank. And there was a lot of talk about the need for a better revenue sharing deal. And there was a lot of talk about the need for meaningful education property tax relief. And there was a lot of talk about any number of tax measures that could help build the economy that we see before us today, or infrastructure projects that could help build the economy that we see before us today. But honestly, folks, that's where it ended. There were the means to do these things, but it didn't get much beyond the talk. And may I submit to you respectfully this morning that the choice coming up in April is very much about a plan for action and continued action versus a record of talk. The choice before us in this election is really forward versus backward, in my view. I'm a little biased. Do we want to live in an optimistic, ambitious, aspiring province, or a province where we are counseled to manage and lower our expectations? Do we want a bold, assertive Saskatchewan, a leader in Confederation, telling its story around the world, engaged with our markets around the world? Or do we want that timorous, diffident, following Saskatchewan that most assuredly existed here not very long ago? Do we want to move forward with full and absolute confidence, ladies and gentlemen, that our best days are still ahead? Or do we want to turn to something else? In my view, that's the choice that your residents will make this month. We will make our case and they will make theirs. We will be reminding people, though, ladies and gentlemen, that today Saskatchewan is strong, stronger than it has ever been. Let's keep it that way. Thanks for your time this morning.